Hey fellow gamers, Chatty Sisa here. I've got an interesting question yesterday, which is something that brought me to the point where I decided to do a vid. I think it's a good topic. It is a question related to what draws men and women, and especially women, to games like RPG games. So let me go into a little bit more detail in this vid. The answer will consist of my own opinion, but I would love to hear your opinion as well on what you think about it, whether you are a man or a woman. It would be interesting to see what is it for you and why do you appreciate and like RPG games. So I would really appreciate your feedback in the comment section below. The question that I have received was regarding the Dragon Age Origins game, because we were discussing the Dragon Age games and went through the franchise. But I do believe that the answer is relatively general and it applies to other RPGs as well. So the question that I've got was, Dragon Age Origins spawned a very prolific fan base with tons of fan art, shipping and fan fiction. From my browsing of these creations, I got the impression that many, if not most of the fans active in the fandom were women. Have you ever felt that the Dragon Age games are aimed more towards women than the usual nerd player base when compared to those older titles? With, again, more focused on complex characters, relationships, romance and such. I would say it's in general aimed towards the entire player base, but here in this game I think it was a little bit more considering also female players. The RPGs that we have seen thus far were generally aimed towards the male audience or the male player base. And I think this game managed to, let's say, branch out and change a little bit the usual fantasy tropes in a different manner so that they appeal to both the male and the female gamers. Now, let me go a little bit more into details on that. I think there are a few, let's say, commonalities or stereotypes that we need to address here anyway, simply because of how men and women are in general wired, let me put it that way. Now, when I was talking to the male gamers, the result was that basically, for the most part, they like the same things as a woman does. And in general, those can be listed as the immersion or escape from reality, which is, I think, the most important for both men and women. The story and how deep the lore is, the writing and what's the quality of the writing, choices and consequences in the game, how interesting the characters are, what's the combat and gameplay like, the character creator, the replayability of the game, what romance options we have, the exploration, what's with the gear and what upgrade options do we have, and then last but not least also the aesthetics and the environments. But the priorities are different. And the list of priorities, they look for other things mainly than the women. And I think they're also looking at it through like a different lens in some ways. So, for example, in an RPG, what's the most important for them is the story, the depth of the writing, how good the lore is, how well the things are explained. They have to have the feeling that they are an important part of the game as the main character. They want to, make sure that their decisions in-game matter, and they want to influence the world with their decisions, and they want to resolve this conflict. And this is also, I think, where they look at the companions in the game, like through more of a friendship lens. So they are looking to see what the companions can contribute to their gameplay and how they are going to help the main character to resolve this main conflict, right? So can I rely upon you in a fight? Yes, no. That's like the big important question for them. So they are more looking through these, let's say, friendship lens, on the game. I'm not saying they are not interested in romances. Of course they are as well. So they are using this feature as well if it's in a game, but they don't emphasize this at that much as women do. So the priority is a little bit different there. Women do emphasize that romance point quite a lot. And they are, of course, interested as well in the companions through a friendship lens, but it is something where they just want to see how well they can cooperate, and they are very interested in the details of every single person's like story. That's not necessarily something then that a male gamer is going to look for. Sure, they want to know the main motivations of a character, but they don't need to hear their entire life stories usually. So that's, I think, the difference here between men and women. Now, the next part of the preferences, which is a little bit different, is the looks. So if you look at games like the Witcher games, Geralt isn't necessarily somebody who would be perceived as a beautiful character, not in the classical beauty style sense, but it is still a character that's very interesting. And I think he appeals to the male gamers because of his flaws in his looks, because not everybody is perfect in real life as well. So I think that's what the male gamers appreciate as well. If you look at games where you can customize a character, so you have a character customization, men will usually say that they are willing to spend like 15 minutes somewhere in the character creator and that's it, let's go. They just want to play the game, right? So they're not really paying that much attention to all the details. For the most part, I'm not saying all, right? So we are just talking about general statements here. Of course, there are outliers. Women, on the other hand, pay great attention to the looks, and they will spend a ton of time in the character creator because they want to achieve this awesome, perfect look, because it's a character that they are going to play with for a couple of hours, and they want to like be represented in game, in the game universe, by a really beautiful looking character. I'm not saying they are not playing The Witcher 2. I am, of course. So, of course, women will play an RPG game that doesn't have a character creator and which just has a preset character where you cannot adjust anything. But I'm not talking about the games where you can adjust your character, and that's where you see the difference. Women will spend a lot more time there and pay more attention to the looks, right? So that's something that is more important for the female gamers. And whenever you have an option to choose between male and female, there is a large portion of the female gamers that will go for the female main protagonist because they can identify better with it, right? So at least for the most part, like I said. That's where Dragon Age Origins already did a good job. So it offered a good character creator for the time. Okay, but let's not look at it through the lens of 2024. For that time, it was really offering a good choice of possible characters that you could create. And that's why I think women were very happy about this option and why they were interested in playing the game to start with. That's reflected as well in the mods or the modding of the games. If you look at who makes the most cosmetic mods, it's actually women. And who applies most of those mods? It's, again, women. Women will spend more time with applying mods that are related to a character's looks, while male gamers will most of the time go for mods that advance the gameplay in a certain sense, like maybe they have better control over something, or the textures, the visual side is better, right? So there is a difference between how many people are using which types of mods, and I think there's a difference between male and female. The male gamers usually also like to analyze the situations in the game a little bit more, like through a logical, critical lens, and they are just focused on, what would be the best logical resolution. Women are usually more emotional in their decision making, so they are often taking a different route in deciding in the decisions when they are going through the game, because they try to do the right thing from an emotional point of view. It's not necessarily bad, it's just a different take than what the male gamers usually have. women have a tendency to stick longer with this game in terms of creating additional art, whether it's like pictures or fanfics or whatever. And they also have a tendency to talk longer about it. So let's say after finishing the game, they have this tendency of discussing it more with others. We like to talk. so they have this tendency to stay longer in, for example, I don't know, Discord servers or subreddits. And I think that's why you have this impression that there are more women interested in the game. I wouldn't necessarily say it. I would say it's not necessarily more women. I just would say they are like sticking longer with this one franchise. Men in general play a game, they like it. Some will definitely go into more in-depth into the lore, read some books, comics, they will go more into detail, but it's not necessarily something that they will be sharing online. So they have not that visibility as the female portion who will be more online. And I think also that men have a tendency then rather have a broader range of games that they are playing. They are playing more games, so they, after a certain time, they switch simply to a new game and play a new game, and then the next one, and then the next one. I think women have a tighter focus on fewer franchises where they might go even more into detail. So I think all of this has something to do with simply how we are wired. As I said, it's natural. Women have to be very social, and they have usually a bigger network of friends and people whom they interact with than men who are action-driven and goal-driven. Okay, so that's, I think, the biggest stereotype that has an effect on how we perceive RPG games if we talk about male and female. Probably I'm not the best to ask this question in terms of like my own personal view, but it is simply having something to do with my age. And the point here is that when Dragon Age came out, the women who are still in the Dragon Age franchise involved and who are very active, and you hear and see them overall everywhere. Currently, a lot of them have reached the age where they are about 35, 40. So if you look back, when Dragon Age Origins came out, they were in their late teens or early 20s. I was already 10 years older. So while they had the, let's say, more time to spend with that game, going in depth into that lore and being really involved in that like interpersonal relationship in the game and focused on the romances and focused on the friendships and everything, the generation of the women that I come from was already, having kids, and the women had like more in real life, more problems to deal with and less time for a game. So I think there is a difference between like the generations as well. If you ask somebody who's in the general age of the women that are now enjoying the RPGs, which is like 35 to 40, they will have probably a different take on it than I have with 50 or 50 plus, simply because of that difference. And if you compare it to when the game came out. So even considering these little differences between the women, like age differences, right, or what they pay attention to, which can be very individual, Dragon Age Origins managed to still like captivate me in spite of all these differences, because it did address anyway the stuff that I like, regardless whether it's something that other people like or not. So that is something that I have seen very positive on the first Dragon Age game, that it was very innovative in like breaking down some of the tropes and giving an option to the female gamers to dedicate more time in the game to those aspects which they prefer, whether it's the character creator, whether it's like more in-depth dialogues with the companions and figuring out, like I said, the whole life story of those. it did manage to appeal to them, and still also, of course, manage to appeal to the male portion of the gamers with having a strong story, having a strong action side, being very important in terms of I need to be the hero of the story and save this world, you know. So even despite of all these differences and in spite of all what the people are prioritizing differently, Dragon Age Origins managed to address it all. And for that time, it was absolutely fantastic. So I think that's why so many people are still going back to that game and why they are still so much in love with the game and are replaying the game. And like I said, TLDR, you are seeing more women still talking about it simply because they have a tendency to stick longer with a certain game or with a specific franchise. And I don't think it's necessarily that it's because the game is like made for them. It's simply because their approach towards the RPG games is a little bit different than the men's. So that's it. That's my 2 cents on this. I know it was a rather long reply, but as I mentioned when I've got this question, it's not something probably that I would be able just to summarize, I don't know, in 2 or 3, a small paragraph somewhere in a comment section. That's not me. Like I said, I'm quite chatty. So I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about how I see it and what I think maybe are the main differences. But as I said, I would really appreciate if you would post your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know whether you see it as well this way or whether you are paying more attention to something different. It would be really great to see your takes on this topic, and I'm really looking forward to your comments. So thanks a lot for watching, stay tuned and game on.